Hi, everyone. Um, so my name's Gareth Doherty. I teach at the Graduate School of Design, and I work with the Dean in leading the project. I just wanted to introduce the first panel. As you know, we have 4 panels today. The structure is that each panel has 2 local experts and is moderated by faculty from Harvard. The first panel is on a very important topic, one that you know is critical to any form of sustainable or planning and design, and that is resource management. The panel is moderated by Peter Rogers, who's the Gordon McKay Professor of Environmental Engineering and City and Regional Planning at Harvard. Professor Rogers' research ranges from the impacts of global change on water resources and the development of indices of environmental quality and sustainable development to interaction of land use planning and central management. Rogers has carried out extensive field and model studies on population, water and energy resources, focusing on environmental problems all over the world. So Professor Rogers will introduce the local panelists. I also wanted to add that Minister Dorset has sent his apologies that he couldn't be here today due to other business. Thank you.
I think, are these microphones working? Yes, okay. Good. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for inviting me to participate in this. You can't hear? It's on. Okay, how's that? I'll speak a little bit closer. This morning you've heard about frogs in boiling water, and you've heard about planning to fail, and etc. And I thought it was a nice other one. That a good starting point is if you don't know where you want to go, any road will get you there. And I think this is about planning, and we'd like to know where we'd like to go. The issue of resource management is an important one, and but typically for economic purposes, but also for now increasingly for environmental sustainability and social sustainability, because of the interactions between water, land wastes, and what it does to the basic resources of the country, particularly in a country like Bahamas, where the water is such a fragile and important component of your development. So let me, without further ado, introduce the speakers. Today we have Richard Kant. Richard is an expert on geology and hydrogeology of the Bahamas. He's currently a consultant providing advice and services to the Water and Sewerage Corporation, as well as the government of Bahamas, on geology, water resources, and environmental issues. Dr. Kant has also worked with the Bahamas government as a hydrologist, mapping out and quantifying the water resources of the major Bahamian islands. And let me just hand over the microphone, or you're going to the chat. Okay. He has some slides he's going to show. Thank you.
All right. Good morning, all. I have a PowerPoint presentation. That's it. And I've only got 10 minutes to talk, so I'm going to be chopping along fairly fast. If anyone wants a copy of the PowerPoint, I willingly send it to them if they give me an email address. Oops, I went 2. There we go. The early sources of water supply. I'm talking about water supply, well, water resources first and water supply. Natural sinkholes, karst features, and ponds. These are obvious things where you can find fresh water. Natural potholes, use at the ferry, Mount Thompson, Gilbert Grant, Steventon, ponds and marsh areas with fresh water in the forest, Ramsey, and Mount Thompson areas. This is all from the Land Resources Survey. Other early sources of water supply was obviously rainwater collection. Their public and private facilities are very common in all of the keys. Early sources of water supply also would have been the shallow dug wells, common features for all the old communities. The resources we exploit, the Bahamian freshwater lens is the Geibern-Herzberg lens. Those are the people that described it first. I've got a little sketch here showing you sort of idealized of one of our long, thin islands where the dunes on the ocean side tend not to be good aquifers, too porous. The bank side, marine deposits usually, they have quite good lenses as a rule. But you can see it's freshwater floating on salt water with a little brackish mix zone in between. These have been described in literature all over the place. I just had this one. This is a horrible little sketch I've done. It's to show you where fresh water can occur on a very small key or an island with some Holocene sands. I mention this because although the rock may not have fresh water, the sand can retain it, because sand is very porous but not very permeable. And things like little kids have discovered fresh water. Daddy, I just dug a hole and there's fresh water in the sand. Well, of course, the early Lacanians, the Indians that lived here, they would have exploited such resources. Well, obviously rainwater, very important in the early days. I put this graph here just to show you that it's very seasonal, as we all know, which is a problem when you collect rainwater, because in a certain part of the year your tank goes dry. This site that I got this from, I can give people, it's a very good site, because anywhere in the world you can put the point in and you can get the predictions of what sea level is going to be for the next 100 years. And I looked at the Exumas and it's not good. I say that now. Well, water resource investigations. Well, obviously the very first guys were the guys who just dug wells, and they dug them. This went on for a couple of 100 years. If you went and settled somewhere and you needed fresh water and there wasn't anything like the karst features, you went and dug a hole. Unfortunately, obviously we know who did a lot of the digging, the slaves, because I've seen some of these wells dug 30 feet deep in hard rock, about meter across, in an area with obviously no fresh water. So that was a lot of work for nothing. Then there was a phase when the Great Exuma particularly was highly cut up and subdivided, and there were a lot of surveys quickly done, always for limited areas. I give an example. A guy called Tanner in 1966 did a survey of Exuma Sound. Other developers went in and just saw if there was any fresh water. Usually drill a couple of holes. The Ministry of Works at that time, this is before the Land Resources Survey, they usually would send a drill rig to an island, and they'd ask where the nearest fresh well was, and when someone said this is the best well here, they would then put a line of wells to be connected up to use as a water supply. So that was how we did it then. Then the Bahamas Land Resources Survey, which I was a part of the team in 72 and 73, which is when we did Great and Little Exuma. And we drilled all over the islands. We did all sorts of stuff. We produced, I have the maps there from the land resources, but I couldn't really put them on a PowerPoint. You wouldn't see them. This is one that's from the US Army Corps of Engineers. They took that, and it's not very clear to see, but those sort of bluish bits are the good lenses. It's mapped out in much more detail. We were working to the scale of 1 to 10,000, so every house is there. And we would usually do their well, we would do whatever we could find, and any holes that we found, including natural sinkholes, and we drilled our own wells with various bits of equipment and did coring and geology, blah, blah, blah. A lot of stuff. The reports are available. People can read them. They're not, once upon a time, they were kept secret. They're not secret anymore. So you can have them, and I have the maps there in case someone wanted to argue about something. Water resources investigation continued. This is Exuma. I've sort of summarized. This is a report myself and Philip Weish did back in 1980. So you see that where I had population, I had to write in the changing population on the top there. It basically is to show the main lenses in Great and Little Exuma, the maximum thickness, the average thickness, how much acreage was greater than 20 foot, because at that time we reckoned if you were going to exploit a lens, you needed at least 20 foot thickness of fresh water. And the volume that could be taken from all of them in, I'm afraid, is cubic meters, the easiest one to use. And you could see, I've said that down in the writing down there, that if we use the whole of Great and Little Exuma, we could get 2.89 million gallons a day. That would be meaning using the whole island. We'd have to say we're, no private land. That was if Exuma was a well field. And in point of fact, that's not very much. You obviously can't kick all the people off to make it a well field. This is to compare it with some of the other islands from the land resources. I put this in really just to get an idea. Lens area over total land area, where it rates, the volume of water over total land area, where it rates, and water available in gallons per day to population in 1970, out of date for Exuma. Definitely. You'll see Exuma is sort of 9, 8, and 10. In the middle, sort of. Not bad. The obvious good ones are Andros, Abaco, Grand Bahama. They're, as we all know, the good water resource islands. But that's sort of just a quick summary so you get a feel for, where it stands compared to other islands. Of course, now we've continued doing some investigations. Black Point, we investigated in 1980. You'll see I didn't have many roads and access was limited, but now we've gone in there and actually done that. But at this time, we mapped out that freshwater lens, which is up to 20 foot thick. Just right by Black Point, we actually developed a well field in it and started using it. That comes later. Subsequent investigation was Staniel Key. We investigated in 1981. The lens there that households use is generally less than 10 foot thick. Nothing we could put a municipal supply on. But though some houses managed quite well. Barataria, we investigated in 1982. The lens with about 20 foot is just on the west side of the settlement. We put in wells to do a water supply, and we could run a well field from there. But in the light of groundwater resource management, we've decided that exploiting a lens of that size is not going to hold up. It will not be sustained.
Richard, I wonder, can I interrupt for a moment?
Yes, sir.
You have a couple of minutes left.
I'm moving very fast.
Okay.
All right. I bring this one just because it shows Ocean Bight, which is a sand aquifer. It's actually the best freshwater sand aquifer in the Bahamas. All right, and this is a bit of a map showing it. It's in meters, 15 meters there, compared to the big lens next door in the Forest Hills area. Historical record. These are the first water supplies that were put in the Naval Base Georgetown. Then after that, we did these ones. Generally, these were these wells in long strings, all tied up, pumped. You'll see no longer in use, no longer in use. Then we have private developments on islands like Lee Stocking, Musha Key, Samson Key, Highborn Key, Cave Key, and many others. They're all using RO, and they've done so for many years. This is just some of the three we have: Black Point, Staniel Key, and Farmers Key. We put in the water supply in Black Point 98, Farmers Key 99, and Staniel Key since 2004. Georgetown RO facility, right now I'm talking about present day stuff. We now have an RO plant in Georgetown that can do 310,000 gallons per day, so as most of Exuma can do. We also have the Emerald Bay. They have a 1 million gallon a day plant. We buy 125,000 gallons a day from them, which we distribute to the northern communities. Bok Key, Norman's Key, and all these other new areas they're putting it, they all have RO supplies, so they have competent. Exuma is one of the places that we do have good water supplies. And Little Exuma, we're now putting in an RO system in Williamstown as I speak. Planning for the future, I'm going to reach 2 minutes. Well, the reliance on desalination is definitely there, and at the moment the best method is reverse osmosis because you can do it on almost any scale. It's simple technology. It just unfortunately needs, because if you're using seawater, you need at least 800 psi plus, means you need a lot of energy to run those pumps. And as far as the Water Corp's concerned, we know the energy problem is very big, but we are moving to using alternate. We've already started. We've got contracts with people in Eleuthera right now to put in alternate wind power to run our RO plants. And all our future RO plants are going to be energized by that. Natural resource protection is a policy, a national policy. Well, I say it's a national policy. I certainly hope it is, that we preserve our fresh water. No generation has the right to destroy a resource like a freshwater lens. And that's definitely. Now, climate change and sea level rise. We have to start seriously thinking about this because I can use Andros as the best example. Andros in the next 50 years is going to lose almost 3/4 of its freshwater. The big freshwater island is going to lose it. I say that because we've mapped out the projections of sea level rise, where the lenses are, and what's going to happen to them. So Exuma, a little more, well, we're not using the resource so much. It's a bit more hilly. It's a bit more protected from the rise. We already had storm surges go over the biggest well fields in the Bahamas, the one in Andros and the one in Grand Bahama. They've had 8 foot of sea on top of their well fields, so we have to be very careful. The what if scenario. I bring this up as a last thing. We're all assuming we can do things like desalination, but what happens if we can't? And I don't know, SARS, world wars, economic collapse, then we have to go back to our natural resources. So no matter what, we have to look after them as best we can. And I believe that's all. And any questions, I don't know when we deal with that.
Okay, we'll take the questions after the second presentation, I think.
Okay.
Thank you.
you.
I think it's better if we take the questions all together at the end. I'd like to introduce Thomasina Wilson, who is the Senior Deputy Director of the Department of Environmental Health Services, with the responsibility for all sanitary landfill sites throughout the Bahamas. She is responsible for the coordination of activities related to Health Inspectorate and the Vector Control Division. She also has served as an agricultural officer and successfully implemented Border Control Unit for Disease and Insect Surveillance Unit. With that introduction, why don't you want to sit here or you want to go to the podium?
Oh, very informal, but I understand. Oh, okay, fine, I'll sit here.
I'm sure the mic gets to.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Those of you who know me know that I'm a very informal, I'm a technical person, so, you know, all the sit down looking all student, that's not me. Okay? I want to talk about a little bit about sustainable waste management in Exuma. I haven't been to Exuma in a while. I just came out of Abaco last week, Thursday. We're now doing assessments of all waste management facilities and disposal sites in all of the Family Islands. I have just recently been given that mandate to oversee all the sanitary landfills, the dump sites, as well as transfer stations. What the engineered version of a transfer station, not so much, but would be kind of our modified transfer stations in some of the Family Islands. So I've already completed Eleuthera and Abaco. My next stop was supposed to be Andros, but it seemed like I may have to fast forward that to do Exuma. So I haven't been in Exuma a while, but based on my past experience in Exuma and having to deal with the landfill that was constructed in Exuma, I would give you a basic overview of the background of what was happening in Exuma when I was there last, and based on the reports that I've been receiving, what needs to be done in Exuma at this time, okay? In 1998, the government of the Bahamas completed a solid waste management study that was funded by the Inter-American Development Bank. And as part of the loan agreement, the government was mandated to construct and develop sanitary landfills in 11 major islands, inclusive of New Providence. Exuma was among those islands designated to receive a new disposal facility. And as such, in 2003, a modified sanitary landfill was constructed on a ridge of commonage land, which was located 17 miles north of the settlement of Georgetown and approximately one and a half miles off the Queens Highway in the settlement of Steventon. So those Exumians know exactly where the landfill is and know where I'm talking about, okay? This facility is at an elevation, and I hear Mr. Ken talk about the freshwater lands. We were at an elevation about 36 to 50 feet above sea level, and was originally designed to accommodate approximately 3,460 tons of residential, industrial construction, and bulky waste from all areas of Exuma. All right. The cell itself was in 150 feet wide and 150 feet long, and at a depth of about 10 feet. The finished surface was lined with hot bituminous coating, which is basically hot tar. And so if you remember how the roads are built, and how impermeable a road surface can be. That's the material that was used in the cell. And this was used because that was what was locally available at the time versus all the geomembrane liners and all the other stuff that would be normally used in a landfill cell. Okay? So we try to look for local material and make it cost effective to be able to put in a system. We also installed at the center a pipe, or what they call a leachate pipe. It's a perforated pipe with holes in it that would lead into a leachate pond, which is also surfaced with the hot tar. Okay? The decision was made to construct a modified sanitary landfill versus an engineered landfill with all the related components was based on the study that was done in 1998. And again, like I said, we were using materials that were available locally. The term modified, I guess, some of you guys were thinking that, what is a modified? Modified is basically used to refer to an engineered landfill with environmental protection provisions and modified operation procedures for those low volume sites. So those remote areas, we would use those kinds of like I said, modified sites, as opposed to trying to bring in a lot of heavy, like I said, the geomembrane liners and all the other engineered materials, can be very costly because you would have to be shipping them in, barging them in. But a lot of family islands, they have locally persons who tar the road anyway, and stuff like that. So that's what we were trying to look at. All right. Generally, operations of a modified sanitary landfill will include less frequent soil cover as well, because that's another problem we found in the family islands. Is a challenge with cover material for these sites. Okay, and we also find that it's a challenge with regards to compaction, and because they are so remote, you can use less compaction. You don't have to cover as daily as if you were in a more urban setting where you have to put daily cover on landfills. Okay. The site in Exuma was designed to include 4 cells. Initially, like I said, in 2003, 1 cell was built. It was supposed to last 5 years. It's now lasted 9 years. And I think it's basically because of the challenges with budget and funds, availability of funds to construct another cell. Like I said, I haven't been there in a while, but from reports that I've been receiving, the cell is at its capacity, and we need to have another cell. So I don't know if anybody in here from Exuma has been out to that site recently and seen the conditions of the site. So I cannot speak to the conditions of the site at present, but from what I know, it's at its capacity. All right? Another thing is based on the haul distance in Steventon to the, like I said, the landfill was supposed to be serving the whole of Exuma. But we know the haul distance from places like Williamstown and further south, it was a long haul distance. So the government decided to put in what they call a transfer station, okay? And those who, again, who are familiar with Exuma know, if they know where the old airport south of Georgetown, the transfer station, it was constructed right in that vicinity. And the transfer station was basically not like a transfer station as we know it. The transfer station is basically a ramp that housed 6 containers, 6 open-top containers. Waste is separated, and the white goods and tires and all that kind of stuff, they are put in separate areas. But the household waste and some bulky waste are put in the containers, and they are hauled to the Steventon site, which is about 17 miles north, okay? Okay, so the way forward for sustainability of Exuma, and again, like I said, once I get to Exuma, I'll be able to be in a better position to assess what is on the ground. But the way forward, in consideration of what all the activities that's going on in Exuma present and the growth population, it is important for consideration to be given for the expansion of the waste disposal facilities. Maybe we need to consider putting either more transfer stations or even putting in another cell again, like I said, that cannot be determined until I get up there. But it is anticipated that further assessments would be concluded regarding the volumes of waste. We know that a lot of additional activities has happened in Exuma since 2004. We had Emerald Bays, and a lot more activities has come on stream. A lot more people has migrated to Exuma. So we need to look at all efforts to build sustainable developments. We also need to look at probably trying to minimize the amount of waste that is produced by looking at recycling programs that will encompass all the the relevant stakeholders, to probably talk to the hotels, the restaurants, and even the general householders. How we can better recycle. We know we've been having a lot of problems with a lot of tires. We import a lot of tires and stuff. So I'm sure I've seen some of the pictures in my reports about tires in Exuma. So all these things need to be assessed and look at relevant ways to minimize the amount of waste we generate in the Bahamas in general, because in just moving through the other islands and stuff, I see there is a need to figure out various different recycling programs for the Bahamas. Okay?
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, we have 45 minutes now for discussion and comments. You've seen two interesting presentations on specific types of aspects. The water supply is one that Richard gave us, and Thomasina gave us the solid waste management. But there are many other aspects to these which we haven't had presentations on, but a fair game for questions like wastewater disposal, recycling of the wastes, you name it. So I'm going to open the floor for discussion, comments, questions. Maybe please tell me who you're addressing the question to, and see if we can get a satisfactory answer. Thank you. Question.
My name is Joan Roll. I am a very, very proud descendant of Mount Thompson, Exuma. And Exuma is in my soul, it's in my spirit. And that is why I'm here today. Also an entrepreneur. I have a business, vice president of experiential education. What we do is we take children from New Providence to various family islands. And Exuma is one of our destinations. So, because we realize that we can talk all we want about sustainability, but if the children don't understand, if they don't love the Bahamas, it's a waste of time. So that's one of the philosophical framework of our company. My question is to Ms. Wilson. I guess the last thing that was said, that's what I sort of focused on, the recycling. I know the Sandals Foundation is very, very much involved in environmental conservation. And you mentioned tires. And something that just popped into my head, trying to get the school children involved in recycling, using the tires to plant gardens. That we can sort of factor that into the whole equation. If we can get the government to donate tracts of land, they put all the tires they can find. And I know about Exuma and the problems, because in the yard, my 94-year-old aunt, they have a cave, a hole about as big as this room and it's deep, and they throw all of their garbage in there. They throw cars in there. So because sometimes when you can almost throw a whole house in there, and one day she almost fell in there, but that's another story. But that you have whole tracts of land, use the tires for recycling, teach the children how to farm, and that's...
Well, that is good in a way, but when you said to just give tracts of land, and you wouldn't want to get all the tires there, because you just need to go by the New Providence site and you need to see 1 week of tires. But it's a good idea to get the kids to learn how to recycle using tires, as well as planting gardens. But you have to be cognizant of the size tires that they would need to use, which would be more like the big payloader tires and stuff. It would have more depth, at least 12 inches, and they can grow a nice little garden in a tire, tire like that. But you also have to consider the mosquito breeding population when those tires get full of water and you can't really use them. But other than that, there are other things that kids can probably use with recycling. There's not only the tires, there's pallets that they can do lots and lots and lots of stuff with pallets, with used pallets. In fact, I was trying to get a program together with used pallets, making houses, doll houses, bedroom furnitures, as well as a lot of other stuff they can, even picket fences and stuff like that. They can, so these are some of the ideas that, they can get kids involved. And I'm always willing to work with kids to show them some of the things that they can use, some of the things that other persons throw out, they can use to recycle.
Okay, and you fill the tires with soil, not water. Anyway,
No, but it can get saturated and still.
Okay,
hot.
and then tax the Sandals Foundation. They're big on environmental conservation and kids. Thank you.
Okay, no problem.
Another question, comment?
Hi, good morning. My name is Anne Rosendahl, and I'm here representing a startup company. It's the founder of a company called Junk to New. A play on the word junk to new. Okay, and I think this thing goes deeper. We have had an adverse problem with garbage in this country for many, many years. And most of us know that most of the garbage goes to the landfill, creating hazardous, toxic waste that actually we have our citizens breathing in many cases when it's under fire. So Junk to New came about. I spent 6 years in a completely environmentally conscious nation, Stockholm, Sweden. And my kids actually were responsible for recycling everything in the house, albeit there was always a resistance, but now we have complete recycling and composting at my home. So I thought, to create this company where we would begin with the Ministry of Education being involved. The Ministry of Education and the government have to be involved to get this thing started from the ground up. So what we are doing actually is that we have a website, which we started, and you can all go and check it out, junktonew.org. And one of the purposes is that we're going to meet with the ministry, sit down with the government, and make it mandatory recycling. Composting is one thing. We're taking all the bottles, we're taking all the plastic. Plastic can be made into cullets. The glass can be crushed and used as an aggregate. And we've been speaking with some land paving companies that are interested in the product. We're going to try to introduce depots where where Bahamians would take all of their bottles and cans, et cetera, and place it in the various depots. In Sweden, when we return our bottles, we get a little receipt. We go to the food store, we use it against our shopping. So there are ways to get people really involved and get the kids all on board. And we're going to have programs also in the schools where they're going to take a junk, and turn it to something new. So we have people we're making lamps, we're using the bottles, we're using the corks of the wine bottles, etc. So I think it's very, very important that we start with our young people. We get the government on board, we make it mandatory recycling. Composting produces rich soil. Lots of things we can do with that. So I think it's very important that we do start now with our 5-year-olds who's going to actually encourage their parents who are older to start recycling. Thank you.
I just wanted to make a comment with regards to the lady who just spoke. And hopefully the government would see the importance of starting from the primary school level and encompassing and doing various other things with regards to waste minimization, because basically that's what it is, minimizing the amount of waste we produce in each household. And once we could get our kids to do that, and even at school, they would come home and then say, "Mommy, let's not throw this away. Let's not put this in the waste stream. Let's not do that." And so I think that is the way to go.
The Black Point District. I heard you mention the mainland, but you got to realize that my district consists of more than half of the Bahamian Islands, and in my district we have boaters that pass through every day to get to the mainland. And in my district right now, we're having a problem with our sites, our garbage sites, and plus with almost 400 to 500 yacht boats, sailing yachters every day, where we don't have any place for them to put their waste. Is the government planning to look at something like this for the Exuma Keys?
Well, when I was in Black Point last, that was doing a cleanup of the disposal site in Black Point. Like I said, I don't know what it looks like recently, but I find that with the government going in and spending funds cleaning up these sites, all we're doing is making space for them to do the same thing over again. So I think we need to look at coming in there and doing public awareness and educational programs to sensitize persons on, especially like you said, in the Keys where it's remote and it's difficult to barge the waste to the mainland. We really need to look at recycle and waste minimization and, to help reduce the amount of waste that winds up in the landfills, because, once persons get in those landfills and they saturate them with waste, then they call the government to come clean it up. And then when we facilitate cleaning it up, then they put some more waste in there with no educational programs in place to even tell the residents, listen, all this stuff don't have to wind up at the landfill or at your dump site. You can reuse some of this material. You can compost. You can recycle, you can put, why not ask the government to bring in some containers to put recyclables in the containers? And it's cheapest to make one barge in and barge it out to somewhere where it can be reused, as opposed to burning it and pushing it up. Because burnt recyclable material is of no use to anybody. And I find in my experience in most of the sites that I go to, stuff is already burnt. They want me to clean it up, but it's already burnt, so then it is no use. Even the balls are already burnt and charred. What can you do with a burnt recycled ball? So we need to look at putting public awareness programs and for recycling in place. And then, probably, you can lead the team as the chief consular to say, well, listen, we're going to separate out some of this stuff and we're going to get some containers in here. I'm sure some of the, like you say, the boaters and stuff will probably provide containers and stuff. And we put stuff in, and then we ship it to New Providence, or ship it where it needs to go. Okay?
Good morning. My name is Duran Rogers. I'm an architect at the Ministry of Works and Urban Planning, Urban Development. I'm going to give you a scenario, one which I know my colleagues would love to have. I'm going to give you a blank check, and I'm going to ask you to speak to, with this blank check, dealing with the sustainability of the Exumas and the Keys. We're talking about planning. So I'm giving you a blank check, and I want you to speak to all the things that you think that can be done, needs to be done regarding the environment and waste management.
What needs to be done?
Well, with specifically waste management.
What needs to be done with waste management?
You have a blank check,
no,
and you can do anything and everything you need to do to make this thing work and happen.
Well, the first thing I would do with the whole blank check was just put it into recycling and waste minimization, and the whole check will be written out to deal with that. We want, all the other components to come along with it, with separating at the source, having areas that you can, depots that you can take various different recyclable materials to. That's what I would do with the blank check.
Okay, that's another question. I'm Gloria Brown from ABC Yacht Services, and I'm speaking to the yacht that passed through Black Point. I think you need to charge them. If you have sufficient, if they're giving you their waste, you have to get it from Black Point.
Right.
So you have to charge them to collect their waste.
And that can go a long way with helping with the recycling efforts and getting the components that you need in place to be able to deal with it.
And also with that blank check, I think you need to take a little portion of that to try to educate people.
The public awareness component.
Public awareness and education.
Yes.
Okay. Richard had a comment on the earlier question.
Yeah, the blank check, which we'd all like to have. We haven't touched on waste effluent, sewage particularly. And as you know, there's only 20% in New Providence is sewered, and none in Exuma, except for Emerald Bay itself. The blank check, when you deal with sewerage, obviously Georgetown could suffice from a collecting system and proper treatment and disposal, and you could extend that out through Hooper's Bay in certain areas. But even with a blank check, you get to the more remote little communities, the odd house here, the odd house there. You can hardly collect that sewage if it's such a small place. And even when we've had the best in the world come to look at the sewage problem in the Bahamas, they tend to walk away shaking their heads. And we've had all sorts of people who've come to help that problem, and they haven't. So what we can really do, though, is really make sure what we do is done properly. And that is, obviously, septic tanks. We have to make sure the building code is as good as it can be, and that we have inspectors and it's done properly. We have the proper effluent drain fields that you need, or wells, if necessary. But, I mean, obviously, I'm just saying, with a blank check, we'd sewer up Georgetown, but we would have to do smaller. And now, obviously, a big fancy development comes, and there've been many talked about, not just Emerald Bay area, but other parts of Exuma. I've looked at so many, I've got confused now, but we make them do it. And if you put in a marina, you've got to have pump-out facilities and treatment facilities. This is what you do with a blank check, and this is basically what our policy is. But, we don't have the blank check.
We have a question here.
Eleanor Phillips with the Nature Conservancy. Just a quick comment, and I think Earl DeVoe is still in the room. Eric was there present in Manawar when we had breakfast at the dump site. And it was one of the best managed dump sites I'd ever been to, bar none. I think we have a great example with that particular location and site for replication of, really mediocre, simple management of a dump and of refuge. I want to say congratulations to Anne for starting. I'm hoping that really grows some legs and starts to run with your Recycle Bahamas initiative. It's something that we desperately need in this country. But I think we need to look at some of the good examples. There might be others, but I know Manawar was one of those that I had personally been to, and I think it's a great
Manawar
example.
site is almost like going to a park. You just happen to have a few containers, okay? And they recycle right down to wine bottles. They put them back in boxes, and they have everything separate out. You know what I mean? So even the waste there is so minimal, because it seems as if those people compost and they do everything. It's like she said, it's like walking in the park to go on the Manawaki side. Hope Town is kind of like it as well.
Okay, here, you have the mic.
Yes, I do. Sorry, I just have one small question. You're talking a lot about recycling and initiatives, and that's really exciting, the Junk to New initiative or business that's coming forward. But I was wondering if every time I hear about recycling in the Bahamas, the conclusion that I hear from the government is it's not financially feasible. Is there any plans from the Department of Environmental Health or any division of the government responsible for that of actually just saying, you know what, it's a problem that we have to deal with and just suck it up and pay the cost?
Recycling can start from home, everybody always look for the government to put in this big amount of money to do a recycling program. Yeah, it creates jobs and stuff like that. But recycling can start small. It can start in small communities. A community can get together and say, okay, it's a vacant piece of land. Find out who owns it. We will put a little recycling facility on that, just to keep the bushes down, to keep vagrants from being there. We ask for permission, especially if it's somebody who's not going to use that property for anything anytime soon. So these are small things that can happen in the community. It always don't have to be led by the government, because leading by the government means plenty money going forward. So maybe if the community can start, and just, recycling also comes with reuse. Things that I may throw out, you may need. Okay? So if we get a area or vacant land and we put in a recycling and reuse facility, you may decide, okay, I'm going to change out my old windows. But then you have somebody down here who needs some windows. You see what I'm saying? So all of that is a part of recycling various different things, okay? And so, like I said, this can start small and then just branch out and grow to where it need to go. And maybe the government will then say, well, listen, we will add something to this initiative, But it can start small.
I have a comment more than a question. Michael Pateman, I'm the archaeologist for Antiquities Monuments. A few years ago, we did a project through National Geographic and other foundations where we explored a lot of the blue holes in the country. And let me just tell you, dumps. We have an out-of-sight, out-of-mind culture in the Bahamas where if it's a hole, we throw it in it. I could give you an example of Rock Sound, Eleuthera, where the ocean hole is a pride of the community, and you don't even want to know what's in there. But my comment is more on the whole education aspect that keeps coming up. We did, as part of this program, every community we went in, we educated the community. And you don't know how many residents said to us, we didn't know, or they were so happy that a governmental agency was coming in and, as part of their project, educating communities. That was a big criticism that they tended to level on New Providence, is that we come in, we evaluate, we speak to local government, but we don't educate the locals. So for all of my other governmental colleagues in here, when you travel to the Family Islands, try, I know we go and we're so busy and we rush out, try to find time to also educate the locals, because we're talking about sustainability and that won't work without education. So I hope there's a big education component in this whole project.
More questions?
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Charity Ambrissa. I'm at the Ministry of Tourism. And I worked in Exuma for several years. And people have been talking about getting a recycling started. I just want to say that they have started recycling in Exuma, the waste management company. They have bins throughout the islands, and they're identified for bottles, for this and that. So that is ongoing as we speak. Further talk about sustainability. The gentleman, Mr. Payton, who said that unless we really get the local people involved, it's not going to be sustained. In fact, when I heard about this meeting, which was just late yesterday, and I assumed it was in Exuma. And so I sent the note to my staff and said, well, I imagine you would be attending, and because I didn't read it fully, she said, it's at COB. I said, okay. You know, and I think we need to have more of these kinds of forums on the ground, educating the people on the ground so that these things can be sustained, because otherwise we will be going around in circles. And somebody talked about the yachters and the cruise boats. There is a program that was started in Exuma, and they now have pump out station, and there is a boat that goes out to the yachts, and they pump the sewage out, and they take it to the site. So there is some things happening already. I just wanted to bring that to your attention.
Hi, my name is Glenn Davis, one of the chairmen for local government on the main island of Exuma. Listen to Mr. Chan speak about the importance of water during a natural disaster. I think something should be put in place for those people who sell batteries. So when you bring a battery in, you can get some kind of discount to encourage them to bring the batteries in, because a lot of times you see batteries laying all over the place when people change them.
Minister DeVoe has a direct response.
Yeah, that's part of the waste management efforts, and that's one of the problems that we have. Batteries and tires, and people tend to discard anything that, you know, almost have what they call the NIMBY syndrome, where as long as they can't see it, you know, it's not a problem for them, it's somebody else's problem. And so, you know, you're right, we see a lot of batteries, we see a lot of tires, we see a lot of almost everything, we see a lot of mattresses, fridge, stove, and sometimes when I pass, even in the Family Islands as well as New Providence, and I'm driving along and I'm like, boy, if these things can only like grow legs and go back to the owner, you would be surprised to know who the owner of these things, you know, that, you know, you go to any track, side road or anything, you can find lots of discarded stuff that was once somebody's, you know, so how did it get there? You know what I mean? If the battery would just pick up legs and get back to the car that it came out of, you'd be surprised to know who car that came out of, that they just opened the door and just kind of tossed it out. Same thing with a mattress on a stove, a microwave, a fridge, you know what I mean? And these are the things that we need to now come together as you know, in public awareness, and like, you know, like the lady was saying about teaching people from the ground up, you know, and getting them involved. But we find that it's almost like trying to teach a old dog new tricks. People they will listen to you, you know, they will go along with you, but then they would still do what they have to do. And then you know, sometimes it'd be the same person. So you say, but weren't you just in the seminar that we was talking about that last week? Why are you here dumping this over here now? You know what I mean? And so these are the things, these are the challenges that we have on a daily basis.
I had a question for
Thank you very much. Dr. Kent, I'm still recovering from your apocalyptic prediction for my home island of Andros. So I would like you please to, if you don't mind, give some indication as to what mitigation could be possible, is possible, or is that a fate we should just look forward to in 50 years? But before you do, I thought the example of Sweden with respect to waste management held a lot of lessons. And I know that in Hopetown and Manawar, as Eleanor indicated, we have a template that if we can catalog the template as to how Hopetown, Abaco, and Manawar handle their waste, batteries, aluminum, cans, organic waste, etc. Now it ends up in the mainland and it's not properly handled. But those two barrier islands essentially do all that was described that happens in Sweden. And if we can just catalog that and make that available to other local government authorities, I believe the issue of waste management in the Bahamas could make a tremendous leap forward. But please tell me how you're going to save Andros.
Yeah, the Andros thing, my comments are based on the more recent predictions of sea level rise. They're constantly changing them. Unfortunately, they generally change them so they're worse. The rise is more than they said it was a while ago and faster, and be that as it may. But you're looking at sort of within, let's say by the end of this century, they're now saying about 5 foot sea level rise. Now you put 5 foot up on Andros, and vast areas of which are already wetlands become open bodies of water. Now, the problem that we have to look at, don't worry about Andros alone. Worry about New Providence. The central, when sea level comes up, it's not coming charging over the ocean at us. It's coming up under our feet. So if you look at Lake Killarney and put a few feet of sea level on Lake Killarney, the airport's gone. I'm just saying, and it'll be coming up there. You can't put a barrier around it. If you put a barrier around one of these islands, you've then got to pump, and you can't do that. You'd have to pump. I don't think anyone could pump. I mean, in places like Holland, as we know, they have barriers, but they don't have our porous aquifer. We're living on this porous aquifer. So this is the problem, and at the moment, quite a few people want to do certain projects, they want to mine rock. One of the first things I look at, I say, that's a good high area. We keep that. If you've got to mine, go in the sea or something like that. I'm just saying, don't come and mine an oceanic island. Now for Andros, we're looking at GEF funding. Unfortunately, the money for this in the world comes from the big nations who they want to make sure you're cutting your carbon content. Mitigation, they call it, not adaptation. Our concern here in the Bahamas is that we're not really creating much in the way of waste carbon, but we need to have adaptation to it. And I tried to get funding for a project because as I said, we know what the precipitation is going to be. It's quite well projected. I don't know how well they do that. I have no idea. It amazes me what they say, but it doesn't look good when I look at it. They give us projections of sea level rise, and they give us even temperature variations. So I'm just saying, in the Bahamas, we know we can go to an island and say, this is this water table, this is the temperature, this is the rainfall, this is what you get. And you can take that model, as you did all around the Bahamas, and place it 50 years in the future in Andros. And you can say, this is what we're going to have in 50 years in Andros, and plan around that, and adapt around that. That's the way I think of it. Of course, we can't get funding for that because mitigation comes number one.
Did you want to comment on that?
Good morning, everybody. My name's Chris Maxey, and I'm proud to represent the Deep Creek Middle School and the Island School and Cape Luther Institute. And we're neighbors across the Exumas Sound, so it's great to be here. Really exciting conversation. We're a community of a little less than 100 people, maybe swelling during the day to 120. And we have a zero waste policy and a carbon balance policy that's lasted about 4 years now. I could talk a lot about waste. What I'd like to do is focus on this idea that we changed the idea to resource. And when we started, we built leach-away septics, which is a traditional way to do things. We were poisoning the aquifer, and because of our location, we were literally dumping waste on the reefs that we were trying to conserve. So we were living hypocritically. And since then, we've developed a constructed wetland plan, and in place in the center of our campus, the most beautiful place on our campus is actually our waste management garden. We call it our poo-poo garden. And we're proud to say that every time we flush a toilet at the Island School, a flower blooms in our garden. The challenge and the last chapter in this specific story, which is really exciting, is that we still had to deal with the solid waste. I'm doing this before lunch, this conversation. And so we had a truck come in, and we didn't know where it went. Probably went to one of these open dumps on the island. What we've done now is built with, and again, young student, this is high school age research. 2 years went into developing a biodigester, which is now functioning. It's producing 4 cubic meters of methane gas and high nutrient liquid for our gardens. And that methane gas is going to replace all of our propane use for not only our campus, but every apartment that we rent in Deep Creek. So there is real value. When I use the word resource, there is real value in these waste streams. You don't have to have a blank check. You can make it work, bottom line. So thank you very much.
Good morning. Sorry.
Morning, Henry Hepburn. My colleague over there. Sorry about that. I'm an architect, urban planner. I'm lecturing here at the College of the Bahamas. We're talking about sustainable futures. My question is, and I'd like to know, do you have a collaboration between yourself, Ms. Wilson, and Richard? Because, as we know, waste and water, doesn't go together. And there needs to be that sort of collaboration. So I'd like for you all to address that. But before you do that, I heard Richard talking about RO, okay? I'd like for you, Richard, to address the negative impacts of that for us, please. Thank you.
Okay, yes, thank you. Well, we all know that RO, we're using saltwater RO as a rule because we don't have, our brackish water resources are probably more scarce than our fresh. We only call them brackish in large volumes when we've destroyed the fresh. When it comes to the seawater, we use deep wells to obtain clean seawater so that it's not out of the sea. You don't have all the living organisms that you might get otherwise. And then we put the waste brines back into the ground. Now, I already mentioned that the problem with reverse osmosis is the high energy costs. We know that. We need to deal with that with alternate energy, and the Bahamas is full of options for that. We've just got to put our heads together, find the funding, and do it. Once you've done it, it's cheap. Let me just say now on deep wells, it's a different subject completely, and I've produced a lot of documents on that, published some, and recently I've been going into that in a lot more detail because everyone's saying, what are you doing? I want to be very brief here because we have a lot of other things to address, but the Bahamas has unique geology. And what you may learn in a continental area, don't bring here because it's completely and utterly different. I'm yet to meet anyone. The nearest is Southeast Florida, where they use deep wells, but they put it way down under high pressure, and they have problems with fractures down at that horizon, the boulder zone, and blah, blah, blah. But we have done it successfully, for example, Blue Hills, where they use water for their turbines. For 40 years now, BEC, or whoever the electrical company was back then, has taken 20 million gallons a day of seawater, cool down their turbines, and put it right back in the ground at a slightly different depth, slightly deeper. That has happened. They've done that successfully 20 years. There's no temperature cross going on. So our deep wells, because of Pleistocene sea levels and blah, 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 cavern developments, and as I say, our geology is different. Even the Pacific atolls don't have it. They have a volcanic core. You go down more than 5 miles through limestones and evaporite deposits, and nobody else can do that. Nobody else has that. As I say, we're unique. So the thinking has to be our own. We have to look at it and we have to test it. And anyone who wants to come in and fund evaluations, we're very willing to work with them because we've been doing our own. In 1974, I was doing Malcolm's Park, doing test wells, putting dyes down it, looking for it. It just disappeared. Put tons of this stuff down. It just disappeared. Now we know what the problems and the threats are of it, and it's been written up and published. And when we had the Caribbean Water and Wastewater Association meeting recently, I presented a paper on it, because these deep wells, with our reverse geothermal gradient, we have options of OTEC from the ground. We have seawater district cooling from the ground, not in the ocean. You don't have to go and mess with your reefs and stuff like that. You can go in the ground. I just say all this because I'm too long-winded on it, and I apologize. But the whole issue has been very carefully looked at, not just by me, but the best in the world in it, like the guys in Florida, the guys who gave birth to that technology. And anyone who can teach us more, they're very welcome to sit down all day with me. Thank you.
And to further add to what what Dr. Candace saying, we are in from time to time collaborate on waste management. You know, I think we need to talk more between the two agencies. The most time we get together is when we have the CWWA conferences, and we've been trying to unite, you know, the waste management aspect with the water and wastewater aspect. Sometimes, you know, we don't get it all come together, but hopefully in the future now, you know, we're seeing the importance of these two entities. We need to talk, you know, generate more talks and discussions and coming together, because sometimes what we do overlap to a certain extent. For instance, the waste sludge, you know, can be used as part of our waste management aspects of things. And so I know at one point they were, you know, water and sewage wanted to transfer their dried sludge to us, so we can add it to our compost beds and stuff. And you know, so it never got off the ground. So I think now we need to, you know, we need to come together a little bit more and collaborate our efforts, because we are overlapping in some aspects.
Good morning, Lisa Benjamin from College of the Bahamas. I'll be very brief. Dr. Kant, thank you so much for two things that you said. One is the alternative energy RO that water and sewage is looking at, and second is the preservation of the well fields and the natural resources, particularly in Andros. I think this is going to be critical for us in the future. I wanted to mention for the education on the dump, there's a couple of mothers who put together, they have kids at that school that's very close to the dump, and they're starting to do a documentary about the dump in Nassau. So for anyone who wants to use that as an educational tool, I think we all know about it, we all smell it when it burns, but to actually see it in a documentary, I think is a really good educational tool. The second comment I had was about waste management. For Exuma and a plan for Exuma, it's going to have to connect to national policy issues. And although we need to reuse and recycle, there will always be waste. And we are a huge importer of goods and products that come with plastic and styrofoam. And at the national level, I think we need to start to think about how we're going to deal with waste economically. And it may be that the government has to consider a disposal fee for importation of these goods. Now, unfortunately, that may be passed on to consumers, and food is really expensive. But I think national policy issues where you can generate revenue to deal with waste issues is going to have to be a big, important consideration for us in the future.
We have it on the books, it's just not been brought forward as yet. The whole aspect of a disposal fee. In fact, I think we're now trying to resurrect it and look at it, because, you know, we, like you said, we import a lot of non-biodegradable items. And so maybe we need now to look at charging that disposal fee for, when they get rid of these things, we have some way, some funds available to be able to deal with the disposal of it.
Good morning. My name is Latonya Williams. I work for the Bahamas National Trust at the Retreat Gardens on Village Road. My question is for Mrs. Wilson. You spoke about you spoke about the landfills. I wanted to know what determines how suitable a site is for a landfill, simply because I visited Abaco a few weeks ago, and I don't know if you're familiar with the old growth forest in North Abaco, where the trees were never logged. And there was a plan for a landfill to be in the middle of the pine forest. It was in the middle of the forest. So I just want to know again, what determines how suitable a site is for a landfill?
Okay, the sites, suitable sites for landfill has to be on anywhere from 20 and above elevation, okay? So we look for hills to put landfills, okay? You know, people probably say they look at hills for mining, for quarry. But the higher you are from the water table, the better a site selection for a landfill. Between 1995 and 98, 99, we did extensive studies on locations for landfills. We also did waste centroids as to where you're going to put landfills versus transfer station. Now, I know you said you in the transfer station is in the middle of the forest, okay? But that is a transfer station. That is not a disposal site. So waste would not be buried there. It's relatively flat. It's remote, but it's also a waste centroid from the location of Cherokee coming into Spring Point, Cedar Harbor. Okay, are you on that? Okay, but in any event, transfer stations are not disposal sites, so we won't impact the ground level or be burying waste at the transfer stations as we know it. Okay, we do that at landfills, and all of our landfills are on ridges of land. That's why it was so difficult in Exuma to find a ridge of land that we can use. I was in battle with the Community Committee trying to ask for that 75-foot elevation that we put that landfill on. The same thing is in Eleuthera, we are on a 75-foot elevation. The flattest area we have for a landfill is in New Providence, because New Providence is already flat. Our water table in New Providence on our landfill is only about 4 feet from the water table. Everywhere else is at least 20 to 30 feet. Okay, so what you would see in the forest is a transfer station. That's only things moving back and forth. Okay?
Hello. I think we could go on for another half an hour with this discussion. I think it's very interesting, and it wasn't quite as heated as I expected it would be. But certainly, I'd like to ask you to join me in thanking the presenters for this morning.
We'll take a 5-minute break, and we'll start at 11:35 with the next.